Hello there. It's time for Most Things Kenobi. I prefer all things Kenobi, but I suppose that's not the Jedi way. As long as it's not all things Anakin.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Most Things Kenobi, a podcast about Obi-Wan Kenobi and all things Star Wars. I'm your host, Lauren.
And I'm your host, Leanne. And this week, we are talking about The Clone Wars, a kid's show? Question mark?
Sometimes not so kid-like, sometimes a little less appropriate for children.
Yes. And we've chosen, at least I've chosen one standout moment that I'd like to discuss. And you two have chosen a scene.
I have. It's kind of more than just even a single scene. It's kind of like I guess it's an arc.
Yeah, the whole arc is questionable. Not in a bad way. It's moments where we've watched the show and we've said, not a kid show? Whoa.
Yeah.
Not that we're saying that The Clone Wars is solely a kid show. In fact, these moments make it highly watchable for us.
Yeah, they get into more adult themes, they get into deeper subject matter that children, maybe on a surface level, it would be kind of scary, but as adults, it kind of like, I would say it touches even into existential dread sometimes. Some of the issues that they deal with, some of it's pretty intense.
Some of it's pretty cool.
Let's jump right into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
So, Leanne, what did you select as your not a kid's moment for the Clone Wars?
My moment is one of those moments where I was watching it and I thought, oh, wow, okay, all right. And it comes from the episode The Mandalore Plot, where we see Obi-Wan and Satine for the first time, in fact. And there's a lot going on in the episode, but at its heart, if it needed a quick summation, we are introduced to Obi-Wan and Satine and what could be their relationship or glimpses of them having a relationship in the past. And then there's, of course, the Republic aspect of it where he's there on a mission, essentially, and it's made known that Satine is the Duchess who wants peace in Mandalore. And with that comes the introduction of the Death Watch into the episode itself. Now, the Death Watch has been mentioned in many aspects of Star Wars prior to this, but this was our first, I guess, animated introduction to it. A lot of people got to see it for the first time. And the moment that stands out to me that I want to talk about is towards the very first quarter of the episode. Satine and Obi-Wan are walking, they're talking, they're flirting, which is great.
Of course they are.
Of course they are.
Obi-Wan flirts with everyone and everything.
Yes, but Satine flirts back.
Well, wouldn't you?
Girl. Yep. But
Hell yes.
in the middle of all this, she's explaining how they are dealing with a rogue terrorist group from Concordia, the moon. And boom, there goes a bomb. Screams ensue. They rush to the victims that are laying there. And then Obi-Wan's getting ready to grill the crowd. Nobody leaves here, and that outs the rogue bomber himself. And what does he do? Instead of talking to Obi-Wan, and in this scene, Obi-Wan makes it very clear, I only want to talk to you. I don't want to, it's nothing. This man just...
He doesn't want him to he doesn't want the bomber to force his hand.
Right.
He's basically asking him don't make me do this.
So what does he do? The bomber commits suicide by jumping off the wall and landing on the pavement or glass or tile below, and he doesn't immediately die. There's some exchangement of words there, and actually I was doing some research on what that translation is, which I've never known.
I did too, but I couldn't find anything. Did you find it?
I found a snippet of a little bit. It's not canonically recognized as the translation. However, a part of it that's very clearly able to be translated is compassionate leaders will burn. And
wow.
Right? So here we have a political statement within an episode that started off fairly flirty and easygoing, and then we have a politically caused suicide.
Mm-hmm.
And while there's no blood, you'll notice there's no blood. He just falls, the pavement cracks. They exchange some words. He exchanges words with Satine, almost as like kind of a, can I go in peace? Mm-hmm. And she agrees to it. That's the sense that I got.
It feels like she's absolving him, or at least recognizing him for and what he's trying to stand for, whether or not she approves of his methods. It's kind of like, it's compassion, even if it's horrible what he did.
Oh, absolutely. And at its heart, Mandalore is very heavily steeped in tradition and lore and symbolism. And I think that she absolves him, or what I interpret it to be as absolution. But the man just jumped off a wall and committed suicide instead of talking to the Jedi. So I thought, oh my God. Now, whether or not a child or a teenager or someone who isn't mentally or emotionally mature gets it, I mean, politically driven suicide like that is a shocking moment in a thing like Star Wars, you know?
It might even be the first time a young person watching that show would encounter that kind of fundamentalism, maybe? Is that too strong a word to use?
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, it's like martyrdom, or like kamikaze mission, some sort of sacrifice for the greater good.
Yeah.
And seeing someone sacrifice themselves for something that would scare a kid. You know, like not being able to process what the information is necessarily. It would be more, wow, a terrible thing happened, and now the person is jumping off a building. That's a lot to ask a young person, which is why I love the show.
Me too. And so that's my moment. And, the Death Watch as a whole is a lot to process. Mm-hmm. Mandalore as a whole is a lot to process. So it's just par for the course as far as I'm concerned with everything else that goes along with the Mandalore plot, which is, several episodes in total. Mm-hmm. Not always in a row, but I saw that and I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, we went there.
It's really brave. And it's brave because it's controversial, and they didn't shy away from controversy, which is, again, another reason why I love this show in particular. Because at first, I felt like season 1 was very tame. It's very fun, and the characters joke around, and it gets more and more serious. Each season becomes deeper, and it deals with more existential issues rather than easy, like good versus bad. There's a lot more gray area in the later episodes, and that's kind of, I think it starts maybe around the Mandalore plot, maybe a little earlier with some of the other, like the Genossians and such.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, it's a great episode, and it starts to ask a little more of the audience because you see both sides of the argument.
Mm-hmm. And the reason I enjoy Star Wars is because on the surface it may appear good guy versus bad guy, or good side versus bad side, but it's actually way more complicated. And that's why it's such a universal phenomenon that people latch onto and can see a part of themselves in some ways. Mm-hmm. I know I do. I mean, there are several characters I find characteristics of within myself, struggles that they have that I see in myself, and it's never black and white, never. So
absolutely,
something like this, we see how many rebels have we seen sacrifice themselves? How many say what you want about the Empire, but those were also people who sacrificed themselves because they believed in a cause.
Absolutely.
I mean, it doesn't matter what side you're fighting on. If you're on that side, you believe in something that you're fighting for. So,
and you believe you're righteous.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mandalore, as messy as they were, had very strong feelings about what they were fighting for and what they stood for. So it was a good example.
Satine was asking them to change generations of social history and cultural history. And as we know, asking people to change is scary. Nobody likes
Very.
to do it,
No.
especially when it's challenging something that is so ingrained in your generational DNA, that's asking a lot of people, and it brings out violence and intolerance.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my scene, and that was my oh shit moment, basically. How about you? Where did you kind of say, oh wow, okay, as far as like kids show?
Yeah, I mean there are many moments, but the one I'm picking is further along in the series. I'm gonna pick some moments from the Kadavo arc.
My fave.
It's so intense and it's so dark, and you can take it at face value as being, wow, this is terrible, what's happening to these people, but they get into a deeper conversation about slavery and the meaning of real freedom of choice.
Yes, and they show a lot too.
They do, and
They don't just do it through dialogue.
no,
They show it.
they do. They go places in this arc that really surprised me when I was first watching it. I was shocked, honestly, with some of the stuff that they chose to put on screen, starting with people in cages,
Yes.
followed by
Yeah.
whipping Obi-Wan on screen, which is crazy.
Horribly. Yeah, with those, what are they, electrified whips? It's
Yeah.
horrible.
Yeah. It's really brutal and really well done, and they are pretty careful about not showing too much. I think they, like what you said about the Mandalore plot, where there's no blood, they keep things just on this side of PG-13.
Yeah, it's not overt for the sake of being,
Right.
gory. It's there to forward the storyline, which they do
Right.
very well.
It's not graphic, it's not gratuitous, but it's pretty intense for a kid's show. And for that to lead into a slave auction,
Yeah, that's intense.
yeah.
And horrible to witness on all levels. Now, I know it's animated, but that doesn't make it any less like, oh, wow.
No, and the queen, the Zygerian queen, starts asking questions about what is a slave, and pointing out that there is a hierarchy of humanity, whether or not you want to call it slavery, because
Yeah.
she's being overt about it, but she's trying to point out the Jedi's hypocrisy of serving the Republic and serving their masters without actually questioning their beliefs and relying on their clones, which were not given a choice in their service. They're born to fight and die and sacrifice
Yeah.
with that intention. So it starts out as very visually shocking, but it gets into very deep questions about humanity and freedom. That
Which I love.
I love
It's
it.
great. I want to think. I want to have to be forced to think and consider things. And if I can get that from an animated show, that's even better. But that's Star Wars,
It is. It's respects the audience's intelligence. It's not talking about the simplicity of good versus evil. There's a lot of gray area, in between, and calling into question the things that we believe in, or at least have been told that we should believe. I thought it was really fascinating and deep, and it's highly entertaining. I think I can keep going back to that arc because it talks about humanity, and you see a lot of compassion, because otherwise it's so dark.
Yeah, and it's one of my favorite arcs for a lot of reasons. Every single character in it goes through a level of, self-consideration. This queen, this slave queen, is telling a former slave how good slavery is. Now, she doesn't know that Anakin was a slave, but he's obviously going to have he has strong emotions anyways, okay?
Right.
But then you talk about slavery to him and try and convince him, again, the queen doesn't know that he was a former slave, but he's going to have very strong opinions on that, and of course it's going to eventually influence his personal thoughts and feelings on the Jedi. Which these questions are asked because the Jedi, the Republic, had a clone army that they often just didn't consider, when one would die, they'd say, we got to leave them. We got to keep going. Now, they did that with each other, too. Like, can't have bonds. You can't have relationships. You can't feel any attachment to, if a master or a teacher loses their Padawan, is got to get over it, that sort of thing, which is way extreme. And it leads to their demise. Mm-hmm. But this is just one more, like, you got to think about this. And yeah, I love this arc.
I do too. It's funny because it's often, like, I see on Tumblr all the time that it's referred to as the kink art, like the kinky arc.
Another reason why I love this arc.
I mean, there's a lot of, like, bondage and whipping going on in it, but like I said, they kind of glossed over that with issues of humanity.
Yeah. And let's not forget the question I asked last week. What is Anakin whispering to the Queen? I must know.
Yeah.
Matt Lanter?
The sexual tension between him and Mirage is...
Oh, it's great.
It's so entertaining and so, again, super complex because we know deep down how he hates the Zygerian scum, but then he's able to put on this facade and carry on with the Queen in this flirtatious way. It makes me think about his duplicity a bit, that he has that double-sided personality.
Right? And I like to think of it as, if he would have went on this mission alone, it would have failed. If he wouldn't have had his friends and comrades in other parts of this arc doing their part in this mission, and, Anakin was the type where he would go and save. He's got to save. He's got to protect. He's got to go. He cares about these people. Mm-hmm. Okay, anti Jedi Code detachment man.
Right.
But if he'd have been there alone, he would have killed every single one of them.
And it's interesting that you say that because as you're talking about that, it's making me remember that many of the characters, well, at least the Jedi characters, all get pulled a little bit out of their moral comfort zone. And they do things that are kind of questionable, like Ahsoka hanging in a cage, mind you, super fucked up and very like Robert the Bruce, ancient, old British way to torture people, hang them in a cage outside of your castle.
Yeah.
When she flicks her fingers and almost pulls, I think it's a tie off the roof.
Yes.
And I've heard Dave Filoni say that people have said, well, that's not very Jedi-ish of her. And he said she knew what she was doing. She wasn't trying to kill him. She was just trying to scare him. Either way. And then Obi-Wan just stands there and watches while Rex skewers Keeper Argus on a stake and is just kind of like, yep, get that guy's getting what he deserves. And we actually, I do too, because
I applauded
bring
that
us
moment
through the emotional turmoil, and you're just like, yeah, these people deserve people. They're not people. They're, I don't know, what are they? Zygerians.
They are cool, whatever they are, with those ears and the hair and
They're like wolves. Wolves. I love them. They're some of my favorite designs, honestly.
Yes, and their accents are great.
Oh, so good. I love it.
I don't know. The whole package is great.
It is. Oh, my gosh. It's one of my favorite arcs because the Zygerians were so surprisingly scary, but also very charming.
Yes. And didn't Anakin say to the Queen, oh, so you have a master too? And she didn't want to believe that. But Dooku was, puppeteering her and many, many others. Mm-hmm. And eventually she meets her demise because of it.
Which it's
everyone is ruled by something, right?
It is, yeah. It's a real credit to the show too that I actually feel sorry for her.
Yeah, and I feel sorry for her because she's so blind to her own predicament.
Exactly.
She has convinced herself that she is the reigning, overseer of all this. She is in control, and really she has very little to none. Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah.
Yeah, a pawn in a much larger game that she can't see.
No.
And I would like to point out too, this is one of the few times you see a Jedi, Anakin, kill a living being.
Oh yeah.
You usually are watching them fight droids, and he just goes in there and stabs a whole bunch of them.
It's what makes him special.
Yeah, that's why we love him. I guess like he actually killed someone in the Mandalore episode, or in the Voyage of Temptation episode.
One of my favorite moments ever.
Seriously, it's such a good moment.
Just
So
stabs
great.
the dude in the back with that flicker of the theme music in the background, and he's
Yeah.
just like, oh.
Cue the Vader theme.
One of my faves. One of my faves.
Oh, it's so good.
So Ashley Grill on Instagram wrote in with her favorite Clone Wars moments. So we wanted to read those and share them with everyone because she was very excited on Instagram, and we love the enthusiasm. We love, just knowing that there are other people like-minded like us who just love the Clone Wars. And Ashley says, my favorite moment would be the Jar-Kai Obi-Wan moment. When he lights up both sabers, my heart just freaking stops. Ashley, we totally get it, right? It's followed closely by the Lawless episode. Another favorite is the fight between the Mandalorian assassin and Obi-Wan on Coruscant. So good. We agree, Ashley. Ashley says she also likes the scene where Obi-Wan is talking to Anakin about his past with Satine. And Anakin says, as Master Yoda says, a Jedi must not form attachments. And Obi responds with, but he usually leaves out the undercurrent of remorse. You can see and feel his emotions so strongly. The angst is just so good. I'm telling you, Ashley, you are a kindred spirit. We totally agree. And we thank you so much, Ashley, for chiming in on Instagram. It's what makes this show that we do, Lauren and I, so much fun. So that concludes our A Kids Show episode. And we want to turn it over to you guys. Join us in the conversation on social media. What was the moment that you said, wow, this is a kid show, ? Or have you never had that thought? Or is it all you've ever thought? Tell us how you felt about some of the more intense moments of the Clone Wars series. We'd love to hear. So next week, we're going to take a slight deviation away from the Clone Wars series to talk about the heart and soul of Star Wars himself, Luke Skywalker.
I am so excited to talk about Luke Skywalker in the season finale of The Mandalorian. This podcast is coming out a little after the fact. We did just recently see it. I think it came out last Friday.
Yeah, and I'm still not over it. I'm still
not either.
freaking out.
I'm like on Tumblr every day looking up animated GIFs and pictures and fan art of it because I'm obsessed.
It was so good. So we got to talk about the reason why we're all here, which is Luke himself, not Hamill himself, which we will talk about.
He is also without Mark Hamill, we don't really have Luke Skywalker. So
no. Not at all. Mm-mm. So yeah, next week, very fun topic. Very fun. I can't wait.
I can't wait either. It's going to be amazing. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Most Things Kenobi podcast. Remember to follow us on Tumblr and Instagram, and don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast player. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, and more.
So until next time, my Space Twin, may the Force be with you.
Always.